Good morning, and welcome to another Seize the Day. I hope you're waking up feeling refreshed and ready to begin a new day. Today, as you can see, is Friday, February the 2nd. Boy, what a this is going by pretty quickly, isn't it? I trust that you guys are feeling refreshed and ready to begin a new day. It's a little gray outside today here in New Hampshire, a little chilly, but otherwise, uh, pretty normal day here in New England. I We are closing up a study this week on Psalm 73. We have been in a series called "This Is Life," and Psalm 73 was all about making God our ultimate choice. We're going to finish up Psalm 73 today, and then I'm going to give you a little preview about these coming weeks. It's going to be really a whole lot of fun. We're going to have an opportunity to really begin to delve into a little bit more of what I think is the substance behind This Is Life. It's a study that we're going to be taking place at Bethany, and I'm going to do it during our Seize the Days. But it's also going to be done in small groups throughout our entire, church, all three campuses. We have a number of people coming together, and they're going to be studying these themes. I'll be preaching on them. We'll be going through them again on Seize the Days, and I think it's going to be a great way for the entire church to come together and start thinking about some very, very important themes that are developed in the scriptures. So I'm looking forward to it, and I'll explain a little bit more. But first, why don't we finish up our study today on Psalm 73? It's been I hope you've enjoyed this psalm. It is one in which you find that there has been this ultimate choice that Asaph has had to make. Asaph, if you remember, he is the worship leader for Israel, one who is been appointed by King David. You read in First Chronicles chapter 15 and 16 that he is the chief of all of the musicians and singers that brought worship into the tabernacle. And so he's like your worship leader, and you would want him to stir the hearts of people. But for him, he nearly lost his way here for a little bit. And what you began to recognize is that this truth that God is good to those who are pure in heart, getting his eyes off of God and looking out on the world, it began to change his whole path. Inside, there was just this internal disruption because he started concentrating on just, how it seemed like everybody else was getting ahead, to use his expressions, right? He says that they don't seem to be struggling. They're free from burdens, right? They're not plagued by human ills like so many of us are. He says they wind up walking around filled with pride and unrestrained passions. He says, their mouths lay claim to heaven and their tongues take possession of the earth. Think about it, heaven and earth, like they rule over it all. They walk around with this sense of arrogance. And he says, and these are coming from people who have no thought whatsoever about God. In fact, their response is, how could God know? Does God even have the Most High? Does the Most High even have knowledge? And he says, they're always carefree. They always increase in wealth. And that caused him, when he started looking around and he had that perspective, he says, surely in vain I have kept my heart pure. In vain I have washed my hands in innocence. All day long I've been plagued. I've been punished every morning. And so you begin to see how all of a sudden his whole life, seeking after God, drawing near to God, now something took place in Asaph's life. Because when he gets to verse 14 and he says, all day long I've been plagued, I've been punished every morning, something is probably not going right. And he doesn't disclose exactly what that is, But we're all part of this human family, right? So you what is it that brings about that that kind of pause in one's spirit? What is it that begins to bring about this sense of heaviness, where you kind of almost lose your way? Could it be a loss of a loved one? Could it be illness, right? It could be maybe you've been on the short end of the stick of some injustice, and you're wondering how is this even possible? Like, how are these people getting away with this? I mean, and then you begin to look. It says, they don't struggle. They don't seem like they have any burdens. They're not plagued like the rest of us with the depravity of this world. They always seem to be carefree. They're always increasing in wealth, which is not true, but that's how you feel. And those feelings then begin to bring about these negative thoughts, and those negative thoughts bring about these negative emotions, and the next thing you know, it's like a downward spiral. Well, that's exactly where Asaph was, because he's like, listen, I in vain I've kept my heart pure, in vain I've washed my hands. In other words, like I don't know what I've been doing, but it's obvious that I've been missing out. But verse 15 gives you the idea that all this was internal, right? He said, if I had said. So he didn't really say this, but this is going on behind his face, which is, I love, this thought, because how many of us walk around and behind the face is a whole lot of turmoil that no one else knows anything about? Behind these faces that we present to the world, there's all kinds of doubt, and there's all kinds of turmoil that could be going on inside of us. And yet there's got to be some reconciliation with that. We have to be able to bring those thoughts that are making us anxious, that are discouraging, bringing about this discontent. If we can't bring that before God, if we can't really, work through those things, it's going to have a way of just overcoming us. So when Asaph says, if I had said, I will speak thus, he recognizes, I would have betrayed your children. So he's speaking to the Lord, and he's saying, generation after generation, if I would have, as this worship leader now, just regurgitated all of this, discontent and bitterness, he says, I would have betrayed your children, which is a way of looking back and remembering that God had taken care of his children over and throughout history, over their long history, right? There were these songs of deliverance, songs of hope, songs of a deep, satisfying love for God. And he says, when I tried to understand this, like when I tried to put it all together in my head, it was oppressive to me. It was like too much. It is that way, right? Like sometimes you look out at the world and you try to make sense of it all, and you throw your hands up and said, and this is just beyond me. Until, he says in verse 17, I entered the sanctuary of God, and then I understood their final destiny. Because these people who seem to be unburdened, carefree, right? No pains, no struggles, no human ills, right? Like he says here, he says, surely you place them on slippery ground, and you cast them down to ruin. How suddenly they are destroyed, completely swept away by terrors. As a dream when one awakes, so when you arise, O Lord, you will despise them as fantasies. I think it's interesting now, like in the beginning, Asaph writes, but as for me, I almost slipped. I nearly lost my foothold. And then he begins to recognize, no. I'm not the one that's on slippery ground. He says, it is those who now have taken their eyes off of the prize, who have made the accumulation of possessions a definition for their life. It's those who have pursued the pleasures of this flesh, right? or the deceitfulness of wealth, they're the ones that have set themselves up on a slippery ground, because those things can be taken away. Those things can be destroyed. And then what? Then you're left with nothing. But you see, Asaph knew enough to discern that life would be different when you come to a knowledge of God, who has created all things and has revealed to us his will and his purposes. That's why he says in verse 21, when my heart was grieved, my spirit embittered, I was senseless and ignorant. I was a brute beast before you. Right? So he's recognizing, man, I was in a bad way. I needed to get my head and heart right. And he says, because this is the truth, I'm always with you. God has made a declaration that he would never leave us or forsake us, that God is long suffering towards us. So he says, I'm always with you. And then he says, you hold me by your right hand. You guide me with your counsel. And afterwards, you will take me into glory. So throughout this life, God is holding me, directing me, until one day he's going to bring me home into glory, which then introduces this thought, as we've been working through this psalm, of eternity. Because that means that this life isn't all that there is. That means that this life is not the end of the story. That means that this life has to be seen in the light of this glory that is still yet to come. Even Jesus said that, right? Jesus says, listen, in this world you will find much sorrow, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Jesus says, I have come so that I could prepare, and I have given my life this ransom for the sins of men, so that I might go and prepare a place for you, so that where I am, there you will be also. I came to open up the doors, to open up the gates, so that you can enter into this kingdom of heaven, a place where there's no more tears. And so this thought just comes back to him again, and he sees the temporariness of the things of this world, how easily they can be corrupted, our own mortality. And he's brought to the truth where he says, like, whom have I in heaven but you? And then the astounding thing, coming from a guy who has been so filled with doubt, he says, earth has nothing I desire besides you. Think about that. But our brother Asaph, man, he's come a long way, hasn't he? And I'm grateful that he could be so authentic and transparent, because God knows what's in your heart anyway. I love it sometimes, sometimes we get into this space where we think that we can hide our feelings from God, like he doesn't know. And we utter these prayers, and yet deep down inside, there might be a heart that is not very quick to forgive. Every time you bow your head in prayer, this situation comes to your mind. Yeah, all those things are the prompting of the Holy Spirit to just get us to be reconciled with him and with one another. And here you have Asaph. He's doing the same thing. He says, whom have I in heaven but you? Earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. See, eternity is going to be that great equalizer. And life is found in the pursuit of the one who alone gives life. This life is about knowing the one who will welcome us into eternal dwellings. So we come to the end, and verse 27 and 28. And Asaph is just going to restate what he stated from the beginning. He says, those who are far from you will perish. You destroy all who are unfaithful to you. But as for me, it is good to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my refuge, and I will tell of all your deeds. See, here is the rest of the story. It's a day of reconciliation and judgment that is coming. And what's it going to be for you? Where are you going to stand? It says, it's very clear in 27 and 28 that there is going to be this day of either judgment or a day of reconciliation. Are we going to be adopted into this family, or will our life demonstrate our complete rebellion against the things of God? See, in that day, right now, the mockers, they're singing a different tune, right? Like, life is good. And like I said, this is not for everybody, right? Because you look out at the world, even there are those who don't know Jesus, and they're having a rough time of it. And then you could look around and you find some, right, who they may not know Jesus, but they get along just fine, even great. But according to Asaph, and according to all the teaching that you read in the Bible and all the words of Jesus, there is going to come a day when God is going to stand in judgment, and we're going to stand and give an account for this life. And what we're told here, as in so many places, on that day, the mockers are going to weep and wail. But they that wait on the Lord, well, let's just say they're going to renew their strength. They mount up with wings like eagles. They run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Asaph rediscovered the satisfaction found in making God your ultimate treasure. Asaph rediscovered why it is so important to sing these truths in the world. Asaph has the song back in his heart, and he is now all the wiser. So this is Psalm 73. At the end of the day, you see that for Asaph, he has made the sovereign Lord his refuge. He's going to seek him out. Well, what does that mean then to really experience life with God? Like all the past couple of weeks now, we've been looking at it from the vantage point of what it's not, right? Like Jesus saying in Luke 12 that life is not found in the abundance of one's possessions, because all that is going to perish with us. He says, no, you need to be rich towards God. Then we went on and we read that we're not to worry about these things. They shouldn't be such a preoccupation all the time. That what we should be really mindful of is that God cares for us, and he'll provide for us. He'll open up these doors. He's the one that's given us strength that we might go out and make wealth. There is this larger plan that God has in mind too, and he wants to take care of his people. And he does it in a whole host of ways, not just through direct blessing like manna falling from heaven, but it's because God has given you a good mind. He's given you skills. He's given you the temperament that you have. And that helps you to forge your way in this world. And all of a sudden you use those tools, and you might be one who can build things. And the next thing you know, you're out there building homes for people. You're fixing, things that are broken and bringing a sense of relief to a lot of people. You could find yourself having these gifts of compassion and mercy, and it leads you in a direction where now you're a doctor, you're a nurse, right? You're a paramedic, and you're coming along people in times of great crises. You have the ability to be a really good instructor, a teacher, a leader, and you're running companies. You're participating by providing employment for other people. I mean, there's a numerous ways in which God is using his people to accomplish his will and purposes in this world, but always recognizing that he is our sovereign. He's our sovereign refuge. He's the one that if we make him our ultimate choice, then all of the gifts that he's poured into our life are going to be used for the right things. And so Asaph understood that. We talked about the unjust steward, about making certain that we are managing God's resources faithfully with a sense of diligence and with a view that one day we're going to give an account to God for all that we have done. But I want to talk more directly now about what it means then to seek his kingdom. What is it going to mean to walk with God? What does it mean to be rich in God? And so we're going to be now embarking on a whole series called Rooted. It comes from a book that first began out in Nairobi. And there was a church in California called Mariners Church that had been working with this church, and they were made aware of this great renewal and revival that was taking place, where thousands of people were coming to know Jesus in a very deep and substantial way. And they found it wasn't necessarily programmatic. And it made me smile when I read this introductory to the book, because what did COVID do for us? Yeah, I'm talking about for the church in particular. What you found is that at the height of COVID, when all of that angst was really being felt, right? When there was so much uncertainty, boy, the levels of anxiety went through the roof, right? I mean, I've shared many times, that's when I started these Seize the Days, because I felt people needed a word of comfort in the days that were so filled with an upheaval. And we couldn't. What happened in those days? Well, there was no place, because they asked you that, we were mandated by the governor to shut down churches, right, to businesses. So there was no place, which meant there was no programs, which meant there were no people, which meant there was none of these personalities that we enjoyed being around, right? And there was no real, like, if you enjoyed going to this group or that group, those leaders, we were not meeting. And what church has become for a lot of people are wrapped up in those things: personality, people, places, programs. I go to the church because I like the choir, or I like the singing. I go to that church because they have a great youth program. I go to this church because their children's program is so great. I go there because they got a good preacher. And we lose sight that the reason why we go is because we ought to be developing a deeper relationship with Jesus. And what I discovered, that for many, church had become all of these peripheral things, and they lost sight of what the whole foundation of the church was supposed to be built on, and that's Jesus. Well, I'm not saying that Jesus wasn't a part of those other things, but when all of those things were away, the depth of your own personal relationship with Jesus was now exposed. People would say, sometimes they say, that you can't close the church. The government has no right to tell us that we can't worship God. And I would look at them and I would say, okay, well, I want you to just think about what you said, because what you're saying is, I can't worship God if the building's not open. Because that's not true. It says that those who worship him will worship him in spirit and in truth. We can worship him. We were able for a period of time, right, to do small groups online. When the weather turned better and we were able to go outside, even with all of what we find now may not has been as scientific as we once thought, right? But all of this social distancing, but nobody really knew at that time. So we're going along with the program. But we would open up our parking lots, and those parking spaces, we would just, use those parking spaces, and the kids would have all kinds of programming outside, chalk drawing, games that they would play. But we found a way to get around that. We made a list of those in our congregation who were the most at risk, are some of our senior groups, and found ways to come and bring people who were willing to take them to doctor appointments, who went to the grocery store and went grocery shopping for them so they didn't have to stand on those long lines waiting to get in. No, like, see, the work of the church, it just continued. And the result, we've seen now, like, there are many people coming back. For us as a church, we're back to where we were pre-COVID. And so what I want to do now in the days that are coming is I want to talk about, all right, what is it that's going to keep us rooted, keep us, in this relationship with God, so that whatever goes on around us, it won't shake us at our core. And what I've discovered is that when you go back and you look at Acts chapter 2, and it begins to speak about the early church, there were a number of pillars that took place that began to give us a hint as to what the people of God were supposed to be all about. And part of it had to deal with looking at some of those things. So rooted, just to give you a big overview, is all about coming together to learn the deep truths that will confront the challenges a godly life will face in this world. So, like, for instance, Asaph, he had his one lens of looking out on this world. But when God informed him, again, through his word, when he entered into that sanctuary, when he entered into the presence of God and allowed God then to speak into his life, he gave him all that he needed to challenge an ungodly way of thinking. You see what I'm saying? So if we learn what these deep truths are, we're going to be able to face the challenges that we're going to face in this world. So learning these deep truths is part of what it means to be rooted. And so we're going to take a look at some of those things. We want to grow deeper in this understanding of God so that we can discover truths that are going to help us to come to terms with the reality of suffering, for instance. We want to learn how to pray and experience the power of prayer, to understand what it means to manage God's resources wisely, to recognize why the church is so vitally important for all of us to stay the course. Think about it. It says in the scriptures that Jesus died. He shed his blood for the church, not just for you and me, but for this living organism, this body of Christ. Don't you think it's important then, in God's eyes, what God's people do together? So, my friends, this is what this new journey is going to look like. And come next week, we're going to begin it together. So over the next couple of months, we're going to put down some real deep roots. And I hope you got the book. I'll be coaching you along. And if you need any help on our part, don't hesitate to communicate with us. Just get on our website at bethanychurch.com, and we'll try and get you a book. And in our studies together, you and me will go through these studies together. Well, it's been another great day. God bless you, my friends. Go out, seize the day, remembering that God is good all the time. And Lord willing, I'll see you on the weekend or during the week. God bless you, my friends.